Do you think Shedeur Sanders is going around telling the NFL Players Association, hey, I talked to Todd Monken 3 days ago?
He fits his offense better because he's able to get out onto the move.
You think it was a coincidence that Andrew Berry met with him the first day Todd Monken was in there?
Meaning you have to go out there in the classroom and you have to learn the offense from day one.
And all of them was there and they put it on camera?
And there's no questions asked whatsoever.
I'm telling you, slowly but surely, people is coming around figuring this thing out.
The media won't say it. They know it. They see the same film you see, and they won't say it. Chase Daniel said it. Chase Daniel, a backup quarterback who spent his entire career holding a clipboard, went on camera and said what every person who has actually watched Deshaun Watson play football already knows in their bones. And the moment he said it, the silence from every major NFL desk got louder. Because when a backup has more courage than an entire media apparatus, you have to ask yourself why.
Shedeur's gonna have a chance, or whoever's gonna be playing is gonna have a chance to show what they have. And with the new head coach and with a quarterback-friendly offense, coming over from Lamar Jackson, I just think that Shedeur Sanders at this point in time is probably giving them the best chance to win.
You have to ask yourself what they're protecting. They're not protecting Deshaun Watson. They're protecting the story. They're protecting the narrative that let them nod along when the Browns made the most catastrophic contract decision in the history of professional football. And if Watson is cooked, if that's the reality, then every single television personality who sold you the Browns are a contender and Watson just needs time is standing in the rubble of their own credibility. So they keep selling you experience. That's the word they've latched onto, experience. Like experience is a quarterback rating. Like experience is yards per attempt. Like experience is the ability to go through your progressions under pressure and make the throw that wins you football games. They keep saying Watson brings experience to this offense, and they say it with a straight face, and they say it because it's the only word left. When you can't sell talent anymore, you sell tenure.
Yes, I'm buying it. You know why? Because you can still have an open competition, but still name a starter. The reason I don't like this open competition stuff, the Browns should name Shedeur as a starter because I do believe you name one of them a starter. So if it's Shedeur, I don't.
When you can't sell performance, you sell the idea that whatever is happening right now is just a phase, and the experience will kick in. That is not analysis. That is cover. Real analysis is what Chase Daniel did. Real analysis is watching the film and reporting what the film says, not what the contract demands. And what the film says about Deshaun Watson is not a complicated conversation. It's not nuanced. It's not a situation that requires weeks of further evaluation. What the film says, what your own eyes say when you watch him operate, is the same thing Chase Daniel had the nerve to put into words, while an entire television industry looked the other way. Let's talk about what this contract actually means, because you need to understand the full weight of what the Cleveland Browns did. This isn't just a bad contract. Bad contracts happen every single offseason in this league. Teams overpay, teams misjudge, teams bet on potential and lose. That is football. But what the Browns did with Deshaun Watson is not in the same category as a bad contract. It's in its own category. It is the reference point. When people a decade from now try to explain to someone what a catastrophic roster decision looks like, they are going to use this contract as the benchmark, fully guaranteed, every dollar, before he had thrown a single meaningful snap in years, before anyone had answered the question of whether he could still play at the level this league demands. They answered that question for you in the most expensive way possible. And the media, the people whose entire job is to evaluate and inform and push back on decisions that deserve to be pushed back on, they went along with it. They got excited about it. They built content around it. They positioned it as bold organizational vision. They let the Browns front office stand at a podium and tell you this was how you build a winning football team. And nobody in that room had the nerve to say what Chase Daniel eventually said on camera. That's the part that should make you angry. Not just that the Browns made this decision. Organizations make mistakes. The anger lies in the gap between what was visible and what was said. The anger lies in the distance between what serious film analysts were seeing and what was being broadcast into living rooms across this country. Because this audience, you watching this right now, you were watching the snaps. You were watching the pocket presence. You were watching the decision-making, the arm, the processing speed. You were watching everything that a quarterback has to do to function at this level. And at some point, you started asking questions that nobody on your television was willing to ask with you. Chase Daniel asked them. And notice what happened. Notice how fast the conversation moved on. Notice how quickly the people who ignored the film went back to their usual programming, as if a backup quarterback hadn't just dropped a grenade in the middle of their entire Watson narrative. Because if they engage with what Daniel said, if they sit down and actually reckon with his assessment, then they have to reckon with everything that came before it. Every segment, every take. Every time they looked into a camera and told you that Cleveland had their franchise quarterback, and the future was bright. They cannot afford to reckon with that. So they don't. They fall back on experience. They talk about the locker room. They talk about leadership. They talk about everything except the one thing that determines whether a quarterback is worth a single dollar of what the Browns are paying, let alone every dollar. And that thing is, can he play? Can he play? That is the entire question. That has always been the entire question. And the people who are paid to answer that question for a living have spent significant time doing everything except answer it. They've contextualized. They've explained the injury timeline. They've pointed to flashes. They've told you to wait, to be patient, to trust the process in Cleveland, which, if you have been paying attention to Cleveland Browns football for any stretch of your life, is a sentence that should have set off every alarm you own. Because patience is what you ask for when the evidence is bad and you need time to obscure it. Real performance doesn't ask for patience. Real performance announces itself. Real performance shows up on the film and in the box score and in the wins column. And it does not require a television personality to explain to you why what you're seeing isn't actually what you're seeing. When someone has to work that hard to contextualize a quarterback's performance, the context is the problem. And now Chase Daniel is the villain? Because that's how this works. When someone in the football world says the quiet part loud, the machine doesn't absorb it and adjust. The machine turns on the messenger. Chase Daniel has no agenda. Chase Daniel spent his career being one of the most respected backup quarterbacks in this league, precisely because he understood how to evaluate quarterback play from the inside. When he looks at what Watson is doing on film and says what he said, that is not a hot take. That is a professional evaluation from someone who has lived inside NFL quarterback rooms and knows exactly what functional quarterback play looks like versus what dysfunction looks like. The media doesn't want that voice in the conversation because that voice destroys the conversation they've been having. Think about who benefits from the Watson experience narrative continuing. Not Browns fans. Browns fans deserve the truth so they can hold their organization accountable. Not NFL fans broadly, who deserve honest analysis of one of the league's most expensive contracts. The only people who benefit from the experience narrative are the people who helped construct the original hype, who need Watson to eventually vindicate the consensus they built around him. They have a reputational stake in this, and that reputational stake is being protected on your screen every week, dressed up as informed football analysis. This is the part where you connect the dots. When an entire media infrastructure consistently refuses to say what one honest voice says clearly, when the gap between what is visible on film and what is spoken on air is this wide and this persistent, that is not coincidence. That is institutional protection. That is a collective decision made across desks and green rooms and editorial conversations that the Watson story cannot be the worst contract story in NFL history because too many people are tied to it. Chase Daniel is not tied to it. Chase Daniel just called the film like the film looks, and every analyst who has been watching these snaps, who has been tracking the mechanics, the processing, the decision windows, the arm trajectory, the pocket movement, every one of them knows that what Daniel said lands because it's accurate. This isn't a debate about football philosophy or scheme fit or offensive line quality. Those are the escape hatches. Those are the side doors the narrative uses to avoid the main entrance. The main entrance is a fully guaranteed contract on a quarterback who the film says cannot do what fully guaranteed money at that level demands. The Browns didn't just make a bad pick. They made the wrong bet with all the chips on a quarterback the rest of the league had already evaluated and moved on from. And the media held the door open, built the hype, asked zero hard questions, and is now standing in the hallway pretending the building isn't on fire. The damning truth at the center of all of this. The Browns don't just own this disaster contractually, the media owns it editorially. Every personality who sold you the experience narrative, who kept the faith alive past the point where faith had any business being alive, who chose the comfortable take over the accurate one. They are not bystanders to this story. They are participants. The worst contract in NFL history doesn't stay the worst contract in NFL history without help. It needs maintenance. It needs constant narrative reinforcement. It needs people with platforms to keep explaining why the evidence you see isn't the evidence that matters. And that maintenance has been performed faithfully by an industry that cannot admit what Chase Daniel admitted, because admitting it means admitting they were wrong, loudly, publicly, and at enormous cost to the people in Cleveland who trusted them. Watson is cooked. The contract is a catastrophe. The media knew and said nothing. And one backup quarterback had more professional integrity than all of them combined. That is the verdict. That is the whole story. If you want analysis that actually respects your football IQ, Huddle Files is where you belong. No media narratives, no hot takes without receipts. Just the film, the facts, and the truth about what's really happening inside these organizations. Subscribe and hit the bell. The next breakdown is already in progress.